room.
So what if it's 1950, you've just graduated medical school, you're doing your residency, and the fancy people in the lab coats say, all right, Bronte, here's your first assignment. You're going to perform a lobotomy on this crazy lady. And the crazy lady comes in, and you say, you know, I think it's probably a bad idea to perform this lobotomy. I think scrambling up poor women's brains is not good. But the consensus medical opinion, the professional opinion, disagrees with my personal opinion here. Would you just put your personal opinion and your own view from your reason and your conscience aside and scramble up the poor woman's brains?
So does the woman, is she wanting this procedure?
Jesus Christ. Michael makes an analogy that completely goes over Bronte's head. Honestly, how this woman has a PhD is beyond me. Michael is asking, would the professional consensus still override Bronte's personal opinion if Bronte felt a procedure was morally wrong? I suppose with the way Bronte answered, it proves she has no morals. The point is, you shouldn't consent to things that are wrong.
Well, she's a bit crazy, isn't she? But maybe she says she wants it. Maybe one day she says she wants it, another day she says she doesn't want it. I mean, with any kind of psychological treatment, there's a lot of ambiguity.
So in this sort of situation,
but let's say that she does want it.
So in this situation, we have the privilege of, you know, perspective, right? We in the 1950s, you don't have the privilege of that kind of perspective. Right. So we understand that, you know, medically, lobotomies are not appropriate. But in the 50s, we are working with the evidence that we have at the time. And if the patient is wanting the procedure and the evidence and studies at the time support that procedure, then sure, you would move forward. You would
perform the lobotomy, even if your faculties of reason, because it was controversial at the time.
Right.
Bronte evades Michael and owns herself at the same time. She brings up the fact that medical advice changes over time. Yet she fails to see that because medical advice changes over time, that is why you cannot believe medical advice as fact, even when it's from your own time. Evidence isn't always accurate either. Evidence can be fabricated if the person presenting it has an agenda. Just like when Bronte presented her evidence of the fetus in a petri dish. After prodding from Michael, she revealed it was mostly the gestational sac and an aborted fetus. What you have to do is have a moral compass, critically think about the evidence, then make a decision on what is best for the patient, which is why we had paternalism in ethics in the first place.
Just as abortion and transgender surgery are controversial now. And so you're saying even if you, because it's not only that we learned in foresight, you know, or rather in retrospectively, oh gosh, can you imagine we did these lobotomies? Wow, everyone agreed to do them, and then all of a sudden we all realized it was wrong. No, it was very controversial at the time, but the lab coat people said, go do them. So I think the analogy is quite apt to abortion and to transgenderism. And let's say you know.
I disagree with you.
The only reason Bronte disagrees with Michael is because she doesn't understand analogies or have morality. Lobotomies, abortions, and transgender surgeries are all controversial medical procedures because the morality of these procedures is questionable. A lobotomy takes an otherwise healthy physical brain and breaks it. An abortion takes an otherwise healthy baby and breaks it. A transgender surgery takes an otherwise healthy body and breaks it. This is why these procedures are controversial. Bronte is failing to understand that these procedures have been disguised as good by the medical people.
Well, let's just go to the lobotomy thing then. You know at the time, as did many, many people in the medical profession, that lobotomies are really spooky and weird and not good, and you really disagree with it. But you're there's the patient, the docs are telling you to perform the lobotomy. Do you really put your own moral conscience aside and your own rational thought aside, and you just do what the doctors tell you to do?
I mean, not necessarily, no.
Oh, okay, good.
Right, and I also don't believe that lobotomies are, you know, analogous to gender-affirming care. And when we are talking about, because gender-affirming care is not necessarily controversial in the medical field, where lobotomies.
Well, the guy who invented it says that it's terrible.
No, as you said, it might not have improved their their mental state, but it also didn't necessarily damage it.
I mean, he shut the whole thing
said?
down. Yeah,
him personally.
Yeah.
But on the
he
whole,
campaigns against it. As do some others.
It's convenient that you choose this one person who campaigns against it.
Well, he happens to be the pioneer of it.
Bronte says, no, as you said, it might not have improved their mental state, but it didn't also necessarily damage it. And Bronte is right that Michael did say that. When Michael was talking about Dr. Paul McHugh, the pioneer of gender transition surgery.
So Dr. Paul McHugh was a doctor at Johns Hopkins and was the pioneer of the gender transition surgery and was the head of their gender clinic. And so he pioneered the whole thing. Then he found after a few years that it wasn't improving psychological outcomes. He didn't find that it was damaging psychological outcomes in most cases, but it just wasn't really doing anything. And it wasn't helping, and so if it wasn't helping, he shut it down.
So at least I guess she was listening. The other half of Bronte's point is wrong, though, because just because it wasn't harming those patients back then does not change the morality of what Dr. McHugh was doing. Michael's point is still clear, which is just that because you agreed to something, it doesn't mean that you can't change your mind. Dr. McHugh did pioneer the surgery and also campaigned against it because he changed his mind, most likely because he realized the procedure was immoral. Dr. McHugh is an example of what's called realizing when you've made a mistake and trying to make amends. It's no surprise Bronte didn't get this point because she has no ability that I have seen to realize when she has made a mistake.
Well, he might have been one of the first to do it, but in the medical field, it is shown that providing gender-affirming care is beneficial to the patients when done with evidence-based medicine and appropriately.
In the medical field, it was shown that lobotomies were really good for crazy ladies. And it was shown with evidence and studies and papers and very serious men in horn-rimmed glasses and lab coats.
See, and I just feel like this line of questioning is inherently transphobic. And when you act as though people who have, gender dysphoria or body dysmorphia or whatever it may be, when you act as though their situation is equivalent to someone in the 50s needing or wanting a lobotomy, you are perpetuating this idea that their life experience and their opinions about their own bodies is inappropriate and wrong.
Bronte says, it is shown that providing gender-affirming care is beneficial to the patients when done with evidence-based medicine and appropriately. Michael says that Bronte is saying the same thing he is, because she's just deferring to the medical experts of her time, just like the 50s doctors deferred to the medical experts of their time. Bronte can't deny she just got owned, so she bullies Michael by calling him inherently transphobic. Michael's reaction is perfect as he just smiles. This is what you should do when a leftist tries to shame you into agreeing with them, because this is not the way to behave as an adult. Bronte bullying Michael is not nice, but he doesn't let it get to him. When Bronte says that the analogy is about saying gender dysphoria patients and lobotomy patients are the same kinds of people, she misses the entire point of the analogy. I think this just shows how identity group focused Bronte and a lot of leftists are. They think of everything in terms of identity groups and completely miss the point of analogies. The analogy was about the morality of the procedure and the blind following of medical opinions, not about the patients in either case.
Bronte, I think your attacks on lobotomies are extraordinarily misogynistic, first of all, and I think they deny the science and the scientific consensus, and they're frankly ignorant, because all of the educated people with all the power, they say that lobotomies are really, really good, and they're for women, and they're to make women feel better. These poor women are dealing with anxiety, hysteria, actually, is what we would have called it then, and you're denying them care that will ease their suffering, and I just think it's really awful that
I didn't say that I would deny them that care. If the patient is consenting to this procedure and the evidence and the evidence and the consensus of the medical field as a whole is, supporting this kind of procedure, then I would go forward with it.
Michael gets sarcastic and uses one of Bronte's tactics on her, which is to make her feel guilty that she wouldn't help the poor women who need lobotomies. It's pretty brilliant, and Bronte totally caves. Michael owns Bronte. Dear Lord, Bronte would perform a lobotomy on someone if the patient consented and if her medical field agreed, despite the fact that the patient most likely would have no idea what they were asking for and that the medical field would be wrong. This is terrible.
So you would perform the lobotomy?
I'm not going to say that I would perform.
You just said you would perform the lobotomy.
I would perform a procedure.
Previously you said you wouldn't, and then before that you said you would.
I would perform a procedure if the evidence supported it and the patient consented to it. That is it.
And in the 1950s, the evidence supported lobotomies.
I don't know enough about lobotomies in the 50s in order to give you an accurate response to that question.
Okay.
Michael owns Bronte again when he says, and in the 1950s, all the medical experts supported lobotomies, and so she has no rebuttal except for evasion. Bronte does what she does best, which is evade Michael, claiming that she doesn't know enough about lobotomies. All I needed to know about lobotomies is that it breaks a healthy brain, and I was out, not doing lobotomies. It's surprising that a PhD student wouldn't also have this thought. It was at this point in their conversation when I had the thought that Bronte is in the wrong profession. She has no morality, is passionate about defending someone else's opinion, even if they're wrong, as long as they showed her evidence for it. Uses deception, switches words around, likes to confuse people, and is willing to defend an indefensible position. Bronte would be an excellent criminal defense attorney.
Okay, all right. So it seems to me that your deferral away from moral conscience, your admission that your moral conscience and your faculties of reason are purely subjective, solipsistic even, they only pertain to your own body and your own possibly deluded view of the world, and so that's why you have to defer to the experts and the people in the lab coats, and those people are the ones who have the ability to make our rights anyway. Our rights, in fact, come from the Academy of Obstetricians or whatever, and because of all of that, if the medical science supported it and if the patient consented to it, you would perform the lobotomy, you would perform the gender-affirming surgery on the men who think that they're women, and you would perform the abortion. I just say humbly and respectfully, Bronte, it should give you pause if you're on the side of the lobotomies.
I am on the side of gender-affirming care and reproductive health care.
Yeah, and lobotomies.
Not necessarily lobotomies, no, because those aren't analogous to gender-affirming care. If you want to, because it seems like you are intent to use manipulative and emotional language in order to...
Michael says 3 words: lobotomies, gender-affirming surgery, and abortion. Bronte says gender-affirming care and reproductive health care. Then she accuses Michael of manipulation after she was the one who used manipulative language when she wouldn't just say sex change or abortion.
No, because if you need to refer to lobotomies in order to make your point,
my point is that the scientists often get things dramatically wrong, including in the medical field.
We should be able to have a conversation about gender-affirming care and abortion without bringing in a controversial procedure from the 50s.
But
no, we don't have to.
No, but here's why we have to.
No, if you are not able to just discuss gender-affirming care and just discuss abortion without bringing in, manipulative language and outdated procedures, then you're not able to appropriately discuss this topic.
I must, because your defense of, well, now transgenderism, but also abortion, is based on the authority and the credibility of the medical authorities. And so I have to demonstrate to you that those medical authorities don't have all that much credibility, especially on sort of bizarre and controversial matters, because historically they don't have a great track record. And that's why I'm going into the not too distant past, by the way. It's not like I'm going back to leeches and bleedings and all sorts of bizarre medical practices that were accepted by the experts for all of human history. I'm going back to a very, very recent example and showing you that those experts in the lab coats that you are deferring to, even for the question of rights itself, are very frequently wrong.
But in this case, we have shown that gender-affirming care is beneficial to patients who have gender dysphoria.
Bronte is wrong, but what else is new? Some detransitioners that I've heard of or seen be interviewed are Helena Kirshner, Chloe Cole, Richie, Shapeshifter, Ryan from the monologue, Sophia Galvin, and Kat Cattinson. These are just a few. There's a lot more that I didn't name.
Normalized? Yes, completely agree. But glamorized? No. Let me explain what I mean. So although I'm doing my best to make the most of my current situation, My transition and detransition were the hardest times of my life, and I'm not exaggerating. My mental health suffered, the testosterone did some damage to my body, but the worst thing of all for me, the hardest thing, is the changes in my singing voice. I've dreamed of being a professional singer since I was very young, and not being able to sing my own songs that I've enjoyed singing for years, has been absolutely heartbreaking. So my purpose for sharing this is not to necessarily prevent anyone or stop anyone from transitioning, but if I can prevent someone from going through what I went through, then I do think that's a good thing. So just make sure you're absolutely certain before starting hormones or anything else permanent.
The fact that Bronte refuses to acknowledge that the analogy proving that her medical expert gods are wrong just shows to me that she idolizes the medical experts. What they say goes, no questions asked. They said it's beneficial, so this time it's right because they're perfect and they can do no wrong.
Haven't though. In
We
fact,
have.
the pioneer of the
We
surgery
have.
says it isn't.
Currently, with the evidence that we have right now, we are showing that it is medically responsible to provide patients with all the information and all of the access to healthcare that can benefit them in their medical care. And so that is the topic at hand, is it not? Is it not discussing people who exist in a body that they don't feel comfortable in? And modern medicine has the ability to help them address that issue.
Bronte, when you say exist in a body, or you say they find themselves in a body, who do you think they are? What does that mean, exist in a body?
Our fellow citizens that we share this society with.
But who is, you're saying that they are distinct from their body.
Yes.
So you are not your body?
No.
What are you?
I believe that I'm a soul with a body.
But you are the soul, and your body is just
It's the
like
physical
your
manifestation.
body's a costume. Oh,
I
the
mean-
body is the physical manifestation. That's different. Well, I agree with that. I think that the body is a symbol of the soul. I think that the soul is a substantial form of the body. We agree on that. But then that means that the soul and the body are linked.
Right, but they're not
In-
the same.
But they're linked inextricably. If you agree, as
Yeah.
we just said, that the body is actually a symbol of the soul, then you don't just go about trading out the body. The body is not something merely to be discarded. The body is, in fact, part of you. To say, I have a body, is an incoherent statement, according to what you've just agreed to. Because you would say, I am a body, and I am a soul, and I'm this, the technical term for it is hylomorphic being, that is body and soul inextricably linked on this earth.
Right, but that doesn't mean that my mentality and my soul is accurately represented by the body that I present to the world.
So if you find a discrepancy between your metaphysical perception of yourself and the physical representation, which you acknowledge is tied inextricably to your soul, why do you have to mutilate the body? Wouldn't it be a little easier just to change your mind and recognize that your perception of yourself is a little bit wrong? If you're a woman, I think you're very clearly a woman, and if you said one day, I'm a man, well, rather than my saying, oh, well, good, go chop your body up, shouldn't I just say, no, you're not, you're a woman, and you're just misperceiving yourself, and you need to, or misconceiving yourself, and you need to get your mind right.
Well, you would be denying what I am telling you is my life experience.
Right, because you would be wrong.
According to
case.
you, but you can't tell someone that their life experience is wrong.
The exist in a body thing is really weird, and it almost sounds spiritual to me in a way. Leftists claim they don't like religion, but they like to talk about bodies and souls being separate. And like Michael said, they are separate, but they're linked, so they're supposed to work together. They're supposed to stay in sync. That's why when someone has gender dysphoria, you should try to make them resync their body and their soul. That's what would truly make them happy. If that's what Bronte is arguing that we do. However, as I mentioned earlier, that is difficult.
I can understand why you might think this, and at one time I did actually think of myself as gender fluid, but no, I am a female. The thing is that a female can dress however she wants, act however she wants, and be however she wants, and she's still a female. So although I do enjoy switching up the way I express myself and dress from conventionally masculine to more feminine, it doesn't mean that my actual gender is changing.
The patient will resist at first until they come to the realization. Usually there's a deeper problem, and that's what the leftists don't care to find out. I transitioned because I had gender dysphoria from a young age. I wasn't okay with myself and thought it would make me happy. But when my voice changed and I couldn't sing anymore, I was heartbroken. Plus, I had side effects from the testosterone. I realized I was just conforming to a male gender stereotype instead of a female one. I still wasn't happy. So I thought maybe I'm non-binary for a while. But then, through meditation and therapy, I realized being a woman isn't about femininity. It doesn't dictate how I live my life, my aesthetic, or whom I love. My dysphoria was hatred of my body due to internalized misogyny. I'm still working on this, but I feel more free than I have in my entire life. They just want the patient to pay them lots of money for an expensive surgery and usher them out the door. The leftists don't want to put effort into actually help people because that's hard. Bronte says, according to you, but you can't tell someone that their life experience is wrong. But she is wrong, and here is why. If your life experience interferes with your physical safety, you shouldn't defer to your life experience. I'll explain what that means with an analogy I once heard from James Lindsay. James said, imagine you go to the hospital because you think you are experiencing a heart attack. So that would be your life experience. The doctor runs some tests on you and determines that you are actually having a panic attack. The treatment for heart attack and panic attack are very different. Is the doctor supposed to just treat you for a heart attack just because you said your life experience tells you that you're experiencing a heart attack? If a doctor administers the wrong treatment to a patient, the patient could die. Is your life experience, is your belief that you are having a heart attack really more important than your actual physical life? It shouldn't be, but I think a lot of the leftists like Bronte think it is. But they would be wrong.
No, I can tell people that their statements about reality are wrong.
So why do you see the world in such a binary? Why do you think that we are men and women and there is no spectrum in between?
Oh, well, because I have eyes and reason. So I can see you're a woman. All evidence shows that you're a woman.
What makes me a woman?
Well, I haven't, I'm a married man, so I don't have too much.
What would an abstract? What would you quantify sex to you?
It would involve your bodily features. Mm-hmm. It would involve your chromosomes. Mm-hmm. It would involve your soul. It would involve, it would mean that you're not a man. It would mean that you're complementary to a man and not identical with a man.
So are you aware that medically, your genitalia, your hormones, and your chromosomes do not always align with a particular sex?
Yes,
there are multiple medical conditions in which your chromosomes, your hormones, and your genitalia do not match and do not fit into this binary.
Yeah, there could be ambiguity, of course.
Right,
yeah.
and so what I'm saying is, naturally, sex is on a spectrum.
No.
And yes, yes it is.
Well, there's such a thing as a liger. Are you familiar with a liger?
Like a lion, tiger?
It's a hybrid of a lion and a tiger.
Yeah.
But if we say that there are some ligers, not very many, but there's some ligers, this would not deny that there is a categorical distinction between lions and tigers. And the same thing would be true. You mentioned a chromosomal abnormality. Let's say Turner syndrome. Turner syndrome is where you have one X chromosome, right? Not an XY, not an XX, you have one X.
Well, why don't we talk about Klinefelter then? Because that's when you have, I think, two X's and a Y.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you could talk about any of these chromosomal or genital abnormalities. That's true. There can be certain ambiguities, but in that expression, it's pretty easy to categorize. I mean, I mentioned Turner syndrome because it's so easy to categorize people who have Turner syndrome as women, and but in the others too. Even when there's more ambiguity, you can categorize these things. And so then we talk about this distinction between sex and gender. And people say, well, sex and gender are different. So you might be a woman, but your gender, by which people really, I think, mean your soul. I think you're using the more precise language there. Your soul might be the soul of a man, say, or something like that. But I just don't see how that would be true if your soul and body really are linked. And also, if it were true, then why is it that we would say that you then have a right to mutilate your body? Wouldn't we then say you have an obligation to express your gender in accordance with your sex?
Bronte complains that Michael sees the world in a binary, insisting that the world is a spectrum. I'm not going to pretend to know why the hell leftists are so obsessed with everything being a spectrum, but I am going to point out some bullshit I see. Every time leftists complain about things like racism or sexism or science or climate change, they accuse normal people of not agreeing with them, and then they will call them names. For example, leftists like to say, you're either racist or anti-racist. There is no in between. You're either for women's rights or you want women to die. There's no in between. You either believe in climate change or you're a climate change denier. There is no in between. You're either a follower of Fauci or you're a science denier. There is no in between. You either care about fetuses or you want women to die. There is no in between. When Michael talks, he has nuance. He doesn't think that only the baby should matter or that only the mother should matter. He is saying both the mother and the baby matter, which is a concept Bronte doesn't seem to grasp. When Bronte talks, she thinks she has to pick one or the other, which is what a binary is. Now let me ask you, viewer, why is the left so obsessed with spectrums when they see the world in such a binary? I suppose Bronte's question to Michael of "so why do you see the world in such a binary" is really a projection of her own behavior and has nothing to do with Michael at all. Bronte brings up this annoying thing that leftists do, which is that just because there are exceptions, that means the standards are wrong. That is not true. You can make a general claim about something and still have exceptions. I am a perfect example of this. Most women like babies and want to have their own children. I am a woman who doesn't particularly like babies and I don't want to have children. Just because I feel this way, that doesn't mean that fact isn't true about most women. I am the exception and the rule has not been formed around me. That is okay. I still exist. The standard exists. The exception exists. Both can exist together with no problems. When Bronte wants to change the example from Turner syndrome to Klinefelter syndrome, she does it for the purpose that people with Turner syndrome are easy to classify, but Klinefelter syndrome isn't. She does it to muddy the waters, to say that because it is hard to classify people with Klinefelter syndrome, then it means the world is a spectrum. This is a tactic the left does where they'll conflate the words correlation and causation. Correlation is the possibility that something may be related to something else. Causation is when something definitely leads to something else. As I said above, just because there is an exception to a standard, it does not mean the standard doesn't exist. Both the standard and the exception exist together with no problems. So just because there are people with Klinefelter syndrome, it doesn't mean that men and women are not the standard. The existence of Klinefelter syndrome does not prove that the world is a spectrum. All it proves is that there are some exceptions to things in the world. If everything was a spectrum, there would be no standards. Leftists either don't understand or don't care that a person may be suffering mentally. They just want to give the person the quick fix, which in this case is just giving the person surgery. Easing mental suffering and working with someone through their problems is difficult. Surgery in comparison is easier, so to speak, just because you can schedule it, do it, and then move on. Therapy, however, through talking and even having to argue with the patient sometimes is more difficult. I think that's the real reason why leftists push sex change surgery. The second reason is, of course, the money. The medical industry makes a lot of money charging people for the surgeries. All this stuff Bronte keeps talking about, their feelings, they don't feel comfortable. I think that's all a cover for the real reason.
Well, body modification is an entire industry. I can get tattoos, I can get
Porn and
permanent
drugs
scars.
are industries too, yeah.
Yeah, but that has nothing, that's not the same. Porn and drugs is not the same as gender affirming care. And it seems like you, when consistently—
They're not the same, but they're all bad.
I mean, to you, but drugs, sure, like porn and drugs obviously have, like, that is a negative industry.
Yeah.
But when you compare them to something like gender affirming care, you are coloring gender affirming care in a negative light.
I'm just saying that the sex surgeries where you chop off the boys, family jewels, that's also bad.
See, and where I stand on it is I think that acceptance and tolerance and respect for people who are different from you is inherent in being a compassionate, moral being. And I don't believe that I get to tell someone that they are wrong based off of my interpretation of their life experience.
Right.
Bronte evades Michael's question of why don't we fix the mind instead of going straight to surgery, and then she says that if an industry exists, then that makes it valid. There's a weird thing she says too that I had to replay about 3 times. She says, I can get tattoos, I can get permanent scars. Now, the transcript on Michael's video and the YouTube captions will say accessories, but I could have sworn I heard her say she can get permanent scars. Why would someone want permanent scars? I think that sounds like you were paying someone to injure you so deep that you get a permanent scar. What kind of sick culture do we have right now? Bronte completely misses Michael's analogy once again, as he is saying all those industries are bad. Michael owns Bronte because she is clueless as to what he is saying. It's almost comical to me that Bronte talks about acceptance, tolerance, respect, compassion, and morality when she has shown none of these things throughout this entire conversation. She constantly refuses to accept Michael's questions, obviously doesn't respect him, has zero compassion for his viewpoints, and obviously has zero morality since she holds some human life as unequal to others. The only thing that might be true is that she tolerates him because she's at least still talking to him.
Right. So to get us back, I think, to the top, I sincerely believe that abortion is evil because it is, as you describe, ending the life of a human being. And so that's what I believe, and I sincerely believe that abortion should be illegal throughout the United States. And I really would just request that you not impose your liberal beliefs on me and force me to surrender my political views in a self-government, for goodness sakes, and force me to live in a society where women are permitted to kill their children. And I would just ask you to respect and include and be welcoming and tolerant of my views and identity. My identity as the correct person in this debate.
So I respect your opinion as it pertains to your body and your life. That is the entire point of being pro-choice, is I am not saying that you or your wife or whoever should get an abortion. I'm not forcing you to get an abortion.
I will never get an abortion.
Right, very clearly. And being pro-choice means that I respect everyone's ability to decide what is best for their body and for their life. And it is
not the baby, of course.
It is their body and their life. And whether physically, financially, or mentally they are incapable or unwilling to endure pregnancy and labor, and I hope every pregnant person who's watching this can try to understand if they had to endure that unwanted and unsupported, how terrifying and traumatizing that would be. And
they should be supported.
And you consistently center the fetus, and I just want to say that I consistently center the pregnant person.
Yeah,
I respect women.
Both.
I respect women and their ability and their knowledge about their own body and their own lives, and I want to protect their right to access health care.
What if they believe that their baby is not that the fetus is not a human being? Do you respect that belief?
I mean, well, that would be medically inaccurate.
So you don't respect their knowledge?
I mean, I respect their belief, but it doesn't make it correct.
You respect mistaken beliefs, incorrect beliefs?
I mean, if it doesn't impose on my ability to access health care and it doesn't affect my life individually, then they can think whatever they want.
But you respect it?
I respect their right to have that opinion.
I think everyone has forgotten the true meaning of the word respect. I hear leftists scream it all the time, demanding we respect them. Bronte is using it in the way to make herself seem superior by saying she has respect for everyone, thinking that makes her moral. Respect actually comes with the feeling of admiration. The technical definition is a feeling of deep admiration for someone or something elicited by their abilities, qualities, or achievements. That's why you cannot demand respect. If you have no qualities that could be admired, no one will respect you. Claiming that you have admiration for people whom you disagree with seems highly unlikely. You can certainly be civil with people whom you disagree with, but you probably will not admire them. This is why Michael asked Bronte, "You respect mistaken beliefs, incorrect beliefs?" Most people don't respect beliefs that are incorrect because the incorrect beliefs don't make them feel like they should admire the person holding the incorrect belief. Based on her answer, I feel like Bronte has no idea what respect means.
But just not to act on it in public.
I mean, I don't understand what you mean by that.
Well, you're saying you respect these views that are wrong, but we live in a self-government, right? We live in a republic. So the government that we get, at least in theory, is going to reflect what people believe. And so what you keep coming back to in these questions of transgenderism and in questions of people mistakenly believing that the human in their body is not a human being, you keep saying, well, I just respect your wrong, you're entitled to your wrong beliefs. But those wrong beliefs in a self-government end up becoming law.
But they must be evidence-based and medically accurate and medically appropriate. And as
so you only respect the beliefs if they're medically accurate. But,
yeah.
But you just said you respected the woman's belief even though it wasn't
I respect
medically
her right to have that belief. She can have that belief if she chooses to have that belief.
Bronte is using wordplay here again. She doesn't respect the medically inaccurate belief, she says. She just respects the woman's right to hold an inaccurate belief. Using the word have or right to hold doesn't make her statement any different, because when it comes down to it, Bronte is of the do whatever you want as long as it doesn't pertain to me mentality, which is the same as respecting an incorrect belief, because in both cases, the incorrect belief is still allowed to float out there and not be corrected. Dear Lord, I have a headache.
As long as there's no consequence of it in society.
Right.
But ideas do have consequences.
I mean, it depends. Yeah, exactly. Like your ideas that you're pushing on your show do have dire consequences for pregnant people. As the University of Colorado showed, banning abortion can increase maternal mortality by 24%. And so pushing these medically inaccurate and emotionally manipulative views on your show and many others, they do have impacts on living, breathing people, and they will lead to more harm and more suffering of people's mothers, daughters, sisters, of women in our society.
Maternal mortality means natural complications from pregnancy in an otherwise healthy woman that end up killing her. It does not count accidents or incidental problems related to the pregnancy. Bronte is messing with the statistics here again. She's right that if more women stay pregnant, maternal mortality will go up. But that's a natural thing. Obviously, if more women stay pregnant, then the chance of any of those women getting complications will go up. If less women stay pregnant, then the chance of pregnancy complications go down because there are less pregnant women. It is natural because if more people are participating in an activity, then the statistics for the risk of that activity will naturally go up. Bronte is using this to fearmonger people while projecting onto Michael that he is the one fearmongering people.
Well, because I'm a gentleman, I obviously disagree with everything you just said, but since I'm a gentleman, I'll give you the last word, Bronte, and I will leave it there. We know my position in the debate. I am firmly opposed to abortion and the transgender surgeries and the mutilation, and to lobotomies. And I guess my critics and opponents support those things, and people can decide for themselves who is more reasonable. I'm sincerely really impressed with you that you came out here and were willing to come on the show and express your point of view, and I wish more, well, I won't call you a liberal because you're a leftist, but I wish more leftists would do it. So thank you, Bronte, for coming out. Where can people find you?
They can find me at Bronte Remsik on TikTok, and my website is bekindandcurious.com.
All right. Be kind and curious out there, folks. I'm Michael Knowles. See you next time.
I also found this very interesting because I went to Bronte's website after I was done recording this video, and her website is entitled Be Kind and Curious. But as I scrolled down to the bottom of her page, I found this. And she calls Michael a conservative troll. Is that what she thinks is kind behavior? I mean, I'm sure Michael doesn't care, and I don't actually really care that she called him a troll either, but it's just the fact that her website has got the word kind in it, and then she's calling people trolls. I really don't think that goes together, Bronte.